Hello, my name is Mike Ginsberg. I'm the president and CEO of Calkin Ginsberg Company. I'm excited to be here today with Mike Baldwin, president and CEO of Altus Receivables Management. Hello, Mike. How you doing?
Mike, how you doing? I'm doing well. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Well, thank you very much. And why don't we start with some introductions? Maybe you could first tell us about yourself, and of course, tell us about Altus as well.
Sounds great. Again, I'm Mike Baldwin. I been in and around the kind of the commercial receivables space for about 20 years. Started my career with Dun and Bradstreet, and then later in my D&B career, I was there for about 20 years. And at the back end of that career, got connected with D&B RMS, which was the commercial receivables business within Dun and Bradstreet. That was subsequently spun out of Dun & Bradstreet as a private equity-owned business, and then became CEO of that business after a few years, and then went through a couple private equity ownerships, ended up selling that business to iCor, and then a few years after that, moved over to be the CEO of Altus, and the rest is history, as they say.
Mike, it's interesting. I think we've known each other for the better part of those decades you've been in this industry. Back at RMS, so you were involved with Dun & Bradstreet when they still owned RMS before they spun it out.
Correct. Yeah, it was it was a kind of a one of three major divisions at D&B, and wasn't kind of part of the core database business, marketing and credit database business. So fortunately for us, we were spun out with some great private equity partners, and as a small kind of commercial, if you will, for private equity folks and relationships with private equity folks. 20 years ago, PNC Equity was the financial partners that helped spin, if you will, RMS out of Dun & Bradstreet, and those same executives, those same leaders are subsequently formed a different private equity business, and which is Incline Equity. And here we are 20 years later, our private equity owners are Incline Equity. And so I think says a lot about Incline Equity, but certainly says a lot about them specific to relationships over a 20-year period. They've been great supporters of RMS, and they continue to be great supporters of our industry and of Altus and Brown and Joseph and Paragon and our new world.
Says a lot about you as well, and going back to the well with you, and getting back into the business, and having you on board as the CEO speaks volumes about their positive experience with you professionally. Let's go back a little bit here. I'm very curious. So back at that time, if I remember correctly, so Dun & Bradstreet owned RMS. Around the same time, on the consumer side, the three credit bureaus each own their own collection agency. TransUnion owned their collection agency. Equifax divested theirs. In fact, iCor was a part of that transaction, the Canadian part of that transaction. I believe RMA picked up the U.S. operations. I'm going back a lot of years, but at that time, corporate divestitures were in fashion, and that was even before the major influx of private equity that we saw into this industry. I would say both before and during that private equity kind of influx. Fast forwarding to today, back then, RMS was arguably the largest commercial entity in and around receivables management by a long shot. I think the second largest at the time was Milliken and Michaels, that was sold to NCO Group years and years ago. But you guys were in a world unto yourself, and here we are today in 2021. If I'm not mistaken, Altus too is the largest commercial receivables management firm, certainly in the United States, and probably by a wide shot as well. Do you feel as though that critical size is a competitive advantage, having some size, having some capacity, because a lot of your competitors are a lot smaller businesses?
So we've said Altus Receivables Management a few times on this call already, and And Altus is now part of a much bigger commercial AR platform, if you will. So I was with Altus Receivables Management, and a little over a year ago, we were purchased by Brown and Joseph, who is the leader in commercial insurance recoveries, receivables management. So we became, we're now owned, the combined company is owned by Incline Equity, who owned Brown and Joseph. Since then, we did another acquisition. We actually did a kind of a carve out of a commercial receivables unit, which was part of a consumer player. And just about 3 or 4 months ago, the end of 2020, we merged with Paragon Asset Recovery, who was the leader in commercial receivables relative to deductibles in the insurance space. So we're just about to close on another small acquisition for broadening our capabilities, particularly in the insurance space. So kind of in a relatively short period of time, what was Brown and Joseph now has Brown and Joseph, Altus, again that small carve out, Paragon Asset Recovery, and now another. So we're kind of over a 15-month period where we've been very busy, kind of combining 5 different commercial brands into what we see as an overall kind of the overall leader in about 450 people or so in the combined business, leader in commercial receivables across a very broad industry segments. So we are working right now. It's the brands are still out in the marketplace, and they will be out in the marketplace, but we're kind of working on overall branding, if you will, of the new entity. So you'll be hearing more in the marketplace about a company name called Armstrong Receivables Management, ARM Strong Receivables Management, which will be kind of the parent company of these kind of great industry leading brands in the commercial receivable space. But yeah, to answer your question, we've stayed very, very close to our core competency, which we feel is commercial. We do a very, very small slice of consumer. The only consumer we really do, Mike, is in certain situations, some of our commercial clients have asked us to take on small segments of their consumer business, but 96% of our business plus is still commercial receivables management.
So Mike, ARM going forward, Armstrong, as you just described it, when you get to that point, how would you brand yourself as a company, more of a BPO, more of a revenue cycle from on the commercial side? I know you're providing those services, but are you still identifying yourself, hence the name ARM, all things receivables management for commercial creditors, large and small?
We when everybody kind of talks about, cradle to grave or full service, whatever it is, it's so broad. And I get a kick out of when companies say that, because they rarely do everything, right? As far as revenue cycle management, you're talking about invoicing, you're talking about a lot of things. And, we're still pretty heavily in the space, kind of the voice space, if you will. Very, we drive technology, but we're about driving cash. We're kind of, we partner with our clients to help them drive cash flow. A lot about the commercial receivable space, Mike. It's so much of consumer receivables is lack of ability to pay. So much of commercial receivables is disputes, right? It's the debtors are willing to pay, but they have something happened in the process, say confusing invoices, bad taxes, wrong invoices, incorrect shipments, poor product performance, whatever it might be. So our whole platform is built on, in a lot of ways, kind of dispute resolution. We help our clients resolve disputes and the cash flows in multiple different segments and multiple different capabilities.
It's funny, I've been through a lot of commercial agencies over the years. Most of the larger players, they don't resemble, or at least in the past, they didn't resemble as much a large consumer agency call center operation. These types of operations were more designed almost like law firms, where the individual talk-offs could be in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars per claim. They needed the privacy, they closed their door, they were talking through negotiating transactions that took weeks, if not months, to conclude. unlike your consumer brethren who are out there where volume is the real key, right? And they're managing volume complexly, tens of millions of accounts monthly of various size, a lot smaller than commercial. Do you feel as though technology gives you a huge advantage to be able to do that compared to where you were, say, 20 years ago with RMS?
Yeah, no, there's no question. The backbone of of the whole Armstrong platform is technology. We need to make our frontline dispute resolution folks, our commercial collectors, as productive as possible. So many times in the legacy systems, Mike, you got on with the debtor in a very complex transaction, and in order to really solve that entire issue, you'd have to get out of your system and send an email, get out of your system and deal with skip trace, get out of you'd have to go to multiple systems. And so we're all about making our frontline folks as productive as possible in one system, in one experience. The other side of that, as far as, to your point about what's changed in the last 20 plus years, is because commercial receivables is so much about disputes, we are very, very reliant on our clients to help solve those disputes so we can have the cash flow from their debtors. So the huge enabler for us is when we have an incorrect invoice, we can communicate directly with the client, get the right invoice loaded up, get it to the debtor. If there's a price thing, if there's a shipment thing, whatever it is, having our clients have full transparency into our system 24/7. We tee up the disputes, they go in, help us resolve the disputes. We offer those dispute resolutions back to the debtors, and the cash flows. So it's just a much, much more efficient, heavily technology enabled process in the commercial world.
Like in the markets that you're servicing, insurance, for example, are you predominantly domestic US, North America, or are you getting involved internationally and maybe globally at some point?
Yeah, we do have we handle a decent amount of international claims. That being said, frankly, 90% of our business is domestic. We have some international capabilities, and we have some partners that help us on an international basis.
Do you see any benefit of either nearshore or offshore solutions within your strategy, or is it all domestic?
We're all domestic. We talk about it here and there, but we've got a pretty good onshore model, and so much of, as I said, commercial receivables is dispute resolution. A lot of it's higher balance stuff.
Yeah, right.
So
very individualized claims, right?
Yeah. I mean, we'll have some of our key folks on the front lines will handle 10, 20, 30 issues a month, right? Even in a whole month, because they're bigger balance stuff. Some of them will handle 300 in their portfolio. So it depends on it. But, there probably are some of our clients where we maybe could be a little more efficient with an offshore capability, but that can bring its own issues, as you know quite well as well, particularly in the commercial side. Maybe part of our future, but right now we're a 100% onshore model and thriving very well in that model.
Excellent, and clearly you are. Let's speak to acquisitions and specifically. So your business is using acquisition fundamentally as a strategy for growth, for market share, for getting you guys of a critical size in this space, and now obviously of the dominant size that you are. But companies like Brown and Joseph, for example, if I recall correctly, grew very successfully organically. In fact, I probably could say that about each of your various companies that build up, that create what is Altus today, will be Armstrong tomorrow. Do you envision a combination, now that you have the size, of select acquisitions? Can you speak to your strategy as part of your growth strategy, acquisitions? Because clearly you're going to focus on organic strategies for growth in the markets that you've already penetrated.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, when I have to catch myself sometimes. We've combined kind of 5 companies into one platform, but the 5 companies are still, very powerful individual brands in their own space. We have great respect for kind of the individual DNA, if you will, of all of those brands. The leadership teams are still key players at all of those brands, the relationship managers, the frontline collectors and the operators. So, this is, part of our strategy is to when you buy a company is to buy a unique company who's an industry leader and keep their expertise. We're not interested in, in any businesses where we won't be able to retain the DNA, if you will, and the talent of the teams. I think one interesting thing is even through COVID, across what we call our Armstrong platform right now, of the combined 5 companies that have come together, the combined headcount versus 14 months ago is up about 10 or 15%. Okay, so even with everything we've to that point, each of the brands has grown organically, and we've continued to add folks again to about 10 or 15% even through the COVID time. So, but yeah, our strategy is, we when you have the great brands, we can go 2 different ways, right? We can either buy like businesses that fit in one of those brands and then kind of combine them with one of those great brands, or we can, like we did with Paragon, enter an entire new capability. It's still they're in the insurance space, they're on the claim side. B&J is more on the premium side. So it was expanding our capabilities, what we can offer to, in that case, to the insurance market. Paragon was a great standalone brand. It'll continue to be a great standalone brand. It's had impressive growth in the last number of years, and it's having a great year this year. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We're not going out of a way to bang things together. It's, we do look on a daily basis for how the 5 brands or 4 or 5 brands can kind of help one another. So can this one leverage technology from this one? Can this one leverage HR resources from this one, or finance resources, or skip trace resources, or a first party capability? So we're looking to draw those arrows and make those hooks between the businesses, but we don't want to do anything to, I keep using the word DNA, I use it all the time here. We don't want to do anything to disrupt the DNA of why those individual brands were great on their own, and now they're great as part of a combined platform.
Well, said another way, you're not buying a widget manufacturer that has a very straight process and assembly line and things. You're buying a service business. And this is truly a service business industry. That DNA equates to experience. The people within your organization have experience running those types of operations, managing those client relationships, managing the personnel associated with those client relationships. I've seen it time and again. You've seen it time and again, where these suits from Wall Street come in. Pardon the expression. Most private equity aren't suits from Wall Street. No one's wearing suits anymore, and they're spread out. I think there's 4,000 of them just in the United States alone that call themselves private equity firms of all different shapes and sizes. But the strategy in many cases would be off with the head, and let's run these businesses. Let's maybe even force integration. It sounds like to me what you're doing is a very controlled approach. You and your team certainly have experience integrating businesses. You'll find those efficiencies. You'll continue to drive efficiency through integration, but it doesn't sound like you're forcing it. It sounds like something that you're working with the team, inclusive of the old personnel and the new regime, blending together and finding best practices. Is that?
Yeah. I kind of, I kind of joke around here. I'm kind of too old to do I have no interest in doing the synergy play, right? Where you're going in and eliminating an entire back office or eliminating a bunch of folks. Like I said, we're up 10 to 15%. So we don't even really, in our acquisition strategy, Mike, well, let me back up. In the commercial space, you're only as good as your relationships, and you're only as good as your operators and then your frontline collectors, right? So a little bit different than the consumer space where you have thousands of seats sometimes and that kind of thing. So if we would never be interested in an acquisition where the relationship managers at the acquired company weren't happy to come on board, where the operators weren't happy to come on board, and where the entire operations team and back office team wouldn't want to come on board. It's not like we're going to, buy a company and not need all of their resources. It's not like we have a lot of frontline collectors and managers that are looking for things to do and need more claims. When we buy somebody, they have an active, vibrant business, and they have an active, vibrant operations team that has plenty to do. We need those people. And frankly, we're not interested in, yeah, to your point, in the kind of the slash and burn. We're interested in welcoming them to the team, seeing if we can share tools, and doing whatever we can to support their continued brand growth.
Our listeners is going to include small, mid-size, and some of the larger folks in and around the space that are providing various services to the marketplace, as well as commercial grantors and various others that comprise our industry of receivables management. But let me ask you, if you were talking to the industry of commercial collection, receivables management type firms, how would you define your criteria in the marketplace? So maybe they can contact you directly, Mike, let you know the types of things that they're doing. Maybe you'll find a fit on the phone, but just generally, do you mind sharing with us what your current criteria is? Because I assume it's evolved.
Yeah, I mean, we it's, I guess it's evolved, sure, but it's stayed. Maybe you'd call it boring. I kind of refer to it as the four C's. The first one is commercial. So we take kind of the group of folks and we really focus. We don't want to be distracted, and it's just not our DNA. I keep using that word. So we talk about commercial. The next thing is culture.
Culture.
Culture is huge for us. I mean, and just in the commercial space alone, there's 600 plus firms. So, we're fortunate that we have the ability to be, I don't know, this is going to sound cocky. I don't mean it to be at all, but picky, if you will. There's some great firms with great leadership and great values and great culture out there. And those are the ones we want to be part of. There's some folks that we frankly wouldn't want to be associated with in the industry. And we've walked away from a lot of potential opportunities where it just didn't seem to be kind of a values fit and a culture fit. The leaders of the different segments that have now comprised Armstrong Receivables Management are great people. They've had great teams. They've driven great cultures, and they've helped enhance the combined culture now. So what a shame it would be, and what a mistake it would be for me to, bring somebody into the family that wasn't a cultural fit. It's just not worth the time and the grief. And it just, it's no way to grow a healthy business. So again, it's commercial, it's culture, it's capabilities. We also look to say, hey, do they have a special sauce here? Are they in a new market? Do they have capabilities? Do they have a technology strength? Do they have an industry focus? Are they heavy in transportation, heavy in technology, heavy in insurance, whatever it is? So kind of capabilities, like, will they make the overall entity, a little bit better? Do they have a special sauce we can all, learn from and benefit from? And so it's commercial, it's culture, it's capabilities. And the last thing is commitment. It goes back to what we just talked about, 3 minutes ago. We want partners to come on the team, if you will, that are still committed to their businesses. We aren't interested if they're not part of it, right? Let's face it. Sometimes there's an owner or some senior folks that don't want to be part of it moving forward. That's fine. As much as we'd like them to stay on, that's fine. But the key folks that have the relationships, that have operations, we want them to be there. Number one, be happy to be part of the family, and then to have them be really committed to being part of the mission moving forward. So I don't know, maybe it's oversimplified, but those are kind of our four C's. You kind of check those four boxes and you're a great fit with us. And we think you'd be very happy being part of the family. When you talked about kind of the industry, as mentioned the industry as well, Mike, and what I would say is that one commonality we've seen in some of, as we've kind of built the Armstrong family, is that there's a lot of really great relatively small, $10 million and below, $5 million and below brands in the commercial space, run by great people. They've got great DNA, got great culture, whatever it is. But they also realize that in today's world, it's getting harder and harder to compete at a high level, right? Now, in the old days, everybody could answer an RFP, right? You get a big commercial RFP right now, you have to have such technology chops, so many technology certifications, and so many different boxes you need to check to be even able to respond to the RFP. So all of those small businesses, not all of them, but many of them struggle with keeping up from a technology perspective, keeping up from a compliance perspective, keeping up from a licensing perspective. Then the owners reflect back and they say, or the people running the business reflect back and say, hey, I started this business because I like managing relationships and I like running operations and all that stuff. This other stuff is just so heavy. And so, I think being part of a broader platform which handles a lot of that other stuff, the technology investment, the data security and all of the compliance stuff and the licensing stuff and all that, takes that burden off of these business drivers and lets them get back to what they love: relationship management, growing their business, and running great operations. That's one of the reasons why we've enjoyed doing what we've done so much, is because it really has been a win-win. It allows, again, these businesses to get back to what they've done. And people always say, so what's going to change after we become part of the Armstrong family? And I kind of say not a lot. We come in that next Monday morning and you still try to make your objectives and keep your clients happy and keep your people happy. And then over those next months, we're going to continue to talk about, what tools do we have that can help you? What tools do you have that can help us? How can we help one another? We have a lot of capital. We have great private equity partners who really want to support our growth. Not through expense cuts. They're not going to cut their way to success. They're going to invest their way to success. And it's been, that's going to continue to be our mantra and our philosophy.
My smaller businesses, for all the reasons you just said, find it increasingly more challenging to compete. I would add to that their key personnel, there's only so much a $2, $5, even a $10 million size business could do for personnel. When you have a larger platform, you could offer them significant growth opportunities. You could challenge them at a higher level than they could be challenged within a smaller business. They may be able to relocate. We're going to talk about coronavirus. Maybe they work from home. Maybe their former employer didn't allow them to do that. So I would think, without jeopardizing confidentiality, you, by definition, would have a more comprehensive compensation structure than a smaller business could ever have within their organization. And I mean, let's face it, as it gets too small, first of all, those wouldn't be appealing acquisitions. Maybe you could speak to, minimum sizes in today's marketplace, but also those smaller businesses, I refer to many of them as glorified jobs. They're not transferable business assets. Do you have a size requirement now before you even put your resources to bear? I know it's hard to say. You got some smaller businesses in the industry. We don't want to insult anybody in the marketplace, and I'm not suggesting that. But if a $500,000 revenue stream were to call you, for example, the owner of a $500,000 annual revenue stream, or to want to sell, what would make that a desirable business for you?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a challenge at that level. I mean, we've the combined platform, there were companies before entering the Armstrong platform that were $30 million in top line. There were companies that are part of the family that were $4 million in top line, right? So it's not that easy to do all the due diligence and all that stuff for something that's really, I don't know, let's just say below $500,000 in EBITDA. Right. We'd prefer something at least in the $1 million EBITDA range. That being said, we love to talk to anybody if it's the right transaction for them and the right transaction for us. Below $1 million is still certainly feasible for us. Again, it's about culture, and it's about their interest and their commitment moving forward. And if that works, we can make almost any transaction work.
You spoke to culture as one of your 4 C's. I have found that this past year, now going on, 13 months, the coronavirus, the stay-at-home movement, the lack of travel, lack of conferences, I have found that distance to work against some acquisitions, because you can't really, over a dinner or a few days in an office, establish a bond with an owner. You're driving, not you necessarily, but in general in acquisitions, we find our clients kind of jumping into data, never meeting with the owners, looking at the businesses remotely, putting in offers, getting into due diligence. Then all of a sudden, an issue comes up. Many times in the past, we could work through those issues because we had a cultural connection, even during transaction due diligence. Forget about later on during life after the deal closes. Have you suffered at all? I mean, listen, work from home is a hard thing to do. Maybe you want to speak to that. Maybe suffering is not the right word. Maybe it's actually been advantageous because it really created a distinct, separate kind of competitive advantage for you. But let's talk about the coronavirus and specifically how you see that impacting your acquisition strategy, both over the last year, which you said you closed the deal, and looking forward.
I guess as far as, there's no question that coronavirus it's impacted our ability to, walk into a company and spend time with all the operators and see the machine going and everything, so many, frankly, all of the acquisitions we've done over the past year, we have had management meetings, but we have it in a pretty much an empty office and, with a few of the key managers, but that being said, it's a big industry, but it's a small industry. So when you take the tenure and the experience in the industry of the leaders of Altus, of Brown and Joseph, of Paragon, and some of our other companies, so many of the key folks across our platform know the key folks, know a lot of the key brands in the industry. So, we have an ability to kind of to check out cultures and people and all that stuff just through back channels or through our own personal experience. And pretty much everybody that's kind of become part of the Armstrong family has been through a connection that says, hey, you got to go after Paragon. They're great people, great values. We've seen them at a million shows. They'd be a perfect fit for our culture. And that transaction went very, very smoothly because it proved to be exactly that. Same thing with B&J, knew Altus in the marketplace. Altus knew Brown and Joseph in the marketplace. The other two small acquisitions, we knew each other in the marketplace. So, so you're right. I mean, there may be some of those where it's blind. Frankly, Mike, we've been presented with quite a number of other opportunities over the last year, and for good or for bad, because we had some experience with some of those folks in the marketplace, we didn't want to pursue those because we just didn't feel it was a values fit or a culture fit. So it hasn't been that bad. Reflecting on kind of your comment about how has COVID impacted acquisitions? Interestingly enough, it's given us a bit of a window back into the culture and the values of some of these companies, meaning that we quickly find out how they handled COVID, right? And that tells us a lot about their leadership and their values and their culture, meaning, did they bail, right? Did they cut costs and run right away when everything got gloomy in March of 2020? Did they bail on their people? Did they bail on their compensation? Did they bail on their clients? Were they not there for their clients? And so when we start talking, are they telling us all these stories about how they gutted the place in 2020? Or did they hang in there? Did they say, hey, all these people and all these clients were here during our heyday, and now it's some dark times, so we're going to hang in there with our people. We're going to hang in there with our clients. And so, that's a big thing for us. Did they bail in 2020, or did they hang in there, persevere, and get through the storm with their clients and their people? And that's so it's a bit of allows us to cheat a little bit, if you will, just because we get to see very quickly, how they handle that. And that tells us a lot about how they'll handle challenges moving forward.
Boyne Capital sent this mug around, if you could see this. We all know EBITDA. They added a C at the end for coronavirus, EBITDAC, right? So there's one-time expenses associated with it. A lot of times the owners that we're dealing with have really lofty expectations, I'll put it nicely,
Sure.
as it relates to pricing. And if they had a hiccup in 2020 because And you saw it a little less on commercial. For the first time, we even saw stimulus go into smaller businesses in my lifetime, government stimulus, not just to the consumers. We saw bailouts. We saw the large bailouts at the Ford Motor Company and the various other auto companies after the Great Recession, but nothing like we saw this past year, where a bunch of money went to small and mid-sized businesses, right? A lot of retailers, a lot of other businesses like that, but manufacturers, distributors, smaller businesses as well. Um, I'm not sure if EBITDA is going to happen going forward. I look at a lot of these expenses as one time. I also look at the PPP loan as in excess to the balance sheet and how to deal with that.
Okay.
A lot of times the owner would say, I'll keep the PPP loan because we think that's going to be forgiven and we'll address that appropriately. But I think my experience, I'd love you to talk about this briefly. I know we've been on the phone for quite some time now, but I think this is important information. I have found just a slowdown in the process of due diligence. Accountants and attorneys aren't traveling anywhere near as much as they used to. Their plate is full, and then now we're in tax season. So things tend to get slow anyway, but depending on the size of the orchestrators of your due diligence team and participants, right? If you're dealing with all the largest firms, you might not have that issue, but the seller sure would. Do you find that there's a slowdown in trying to complete deals, or is just business as usual and things are getting done relatively at the same pace that they were?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll go back to Incline Equity, our partners and our private equity owners. They're great at this. They've got great partners that can quickly do, bring in the legal team and bring in the quality of earnings analysis and all that stuff. So I'm not sure it's clearly there is a little more complexity given some of the, we do see some pretty crazy adjustments, COVID adjustments to earnings and all that stuff. So I guess they have to filter through that, but certainly Incline Equity and their partners are, pretty great at kind of fast tracking that. The big dependency on, and I know you know this very well, Mike, is with getting deals done at a decent pace is how seriously the prospect company's team is as far as getting information uh, to us. So we have some that understand what they're going to go through. They take it real seriously. They get their accountants lined up. They get their finance team lined up. They get their legal team lined up. The information flows. The data room's populated real quickly. We ask them questions. They get back to us the same week with answers to those questions, and things move along at a great pace. Other ones, probably maybe didn't understand what they were getting into and didn't have the information ready or weren't ready to go through the process. So that can drag on for months. But on our side, we, even with COVID adjustments and all that stuff, we have the horsepower to get through that data and make decisions and make offers very, very quickly and close very, very quickly. It's a two-way street though, because we can only move at a certain pace if our potential partners, get us the information and get us the answers to any questions that come off that information, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and just taking that one step further, uh, individuals such as yourself, private equity such as your partner, the sophistication of your legal, your accounting, your operationals diligence team, um, it gives you the ability to move as quickly as possible. The individual owner operated business, right? Owned operated business doesn't necessarily have those skills, but or resources, a better way to say it. But what I try to tell them years in advance of a potential sale, tell me if you agree with this, is get your house in order. A lot of the things that we're talking about are going to be asked, whether they're asked today, tomorrow, 5, 10 years down the road. They're still going to look for 3 years or maybe 5 years of financial statements, right? They're still going to look for various things with vendor contracts, employment contracts, et cetera, et cetera. Not to go through the list, but do you agree that if an owner really wants to, at some point in the life cycle of their business, sell, they're better off being prepared before they start interacting with folks like you?
Yeah, I think yeah, there's no question. The only thing I'd add to that is that being said, I don't think that business owner needs to be the expert in all of those functional areas. Meaning that we're going through an opportunity now, and the owner is busy running his business, and he has a separate kind of a financial firm that helps him. So our private equity team and their partners have we've taken the burden off that owner, and they're dealing directly with that team. They're dealing directly with the legal folks. So it's not like all of those answers need to come from that business owner, that main operator who feels the weight of the world on their shoulders. We're used to, and we prefer to deal with the owner's business partners to help that owner, get through the process and make it as easy as possible on that owner. So
while still maintaining their operation, right? Because you're talking about two full-time jobs if they don't have a team around them assisting them with this transaction. Last thing, you're talking to an owner. The owner's thinking about potentially selling, and they're thinking about your organization, and they're just thinking about the next step. What message do you want to convey to them in, say, 30 seconds or less, if they're thinking about selling or if they're thinking about your company, either one? What would you tell them is something they should be thinking about now with regards to their business?
I immediately go through the 4 C's with them and tell them, kind of fast track it to make sure we can check all those boxes. The beautiful part about, this sounds a bit self-serving, but when you're dealing with a potential acquirer who has recently built up a broad number of brands and built up their family, the nice part is they don't have to hear it from me. The first thing I would do is if you were going to talk to us about becoming part of the family, is you've got a number of other business owners that are part of our family now that just went through it, right? Some 15 months ago, some 12 months ago, some 3 months ago. So the first thing I do is say, talk to these guys. So, and tell, learn from them or hear from them, how the experience was from them during the process and now through the process. How are they being treated? How is their brand being treated? How are their people being treated? Are they getting more resources or less resources? So that's certainly an advantage of potentially being acquired by somebody who has already been through it a number of times. You've got some great case studies, again, not through me, but through some of the folks that are running our individual brands.
And as you said earlier, this industry is quite small. It's also quite round. People do talk a lot. So the fact that you have been greatly benefited by relationships that you've leveraged to get to where you are in the acquisitions that you've completed, they too can pick up the phone. They can call people and say, hey, what do you think about these guys who may have not transacted with you, or maybe they found out perhaps they started a discussion with you and didn't complete it, and they learned on their own about that. That's going to happen too. So the more they can educate themselves and prepare themselves, the better off they're going to be, the better off you're going to be in any transaction. Contrary to what Donald Trump once said, if you read his books, there doesn't need to be a winner and a loser in every transaction. I think there could be 3 winners: yourselves and your organization, not severely overpaying, getting gouged, buying a bag of tricks. You're buying a proven entity at a competitive price, or else you wouldn't be getting deals done. And you're providing longevity, not just to their existing organization and staff, but to their clients as well. From a seller's perspective, as they kind of think about it, they're not taking these businesses to the proverbial grave. If they have a succession strategy and they have personnel in place, or a son or daughter, or whatever the case might be, that they could transition the business to and not put their estate at risk. I can't emphasize that critical component enough. But if they want to succeed and put it down, they're going to do that. That should be a process-driven, philosophy too. They shouldn't just do it overnight. Same thing with the sale of the business. Prepare, get ready for it. Don't shy away from it. Embrace it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to jeopardize confidentiality. You're going to talk to every buyer. But when they talk to folks like you, and I appreciate your time this afternoon, because I think you've explained very well why you guys are so successful in what it is that you do in the marketplace. And I said there's 3 winners. self-serving as well. If we're involved or someone like us is involved, hopefully we win out and close a transaction. Everybody gets compensated. But beyond that, you want to make sure, and it's a good feeling to know 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, that business has achieved its growth goals and possibly recapped, went public, sold out to a third party, or continued its expansive ways. So I think there could be three winners in every transaction. I mean, certainly you're winning. You're winning in everything that you're doing, or else you wouldn't be there after all these years doing what you're doing. And I think it speaks volumes that you're back and doing it with one of the original private equity firms that you worked with years and years ago, and who have been in the industry years and years ago, and they're
Yeah.
back in the industry today. So I think anybody who's thinking about a sale should absolutely engage in dialogue with you. The worst you could do is say no.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. To your point, it's what a shame it would be to bring somebody on the team that didn't feel like a winner, didn't feel like it was a positive transaction, and then
That's
feeling
cancer.
that baggage is just going to be, it's just not worth it for anybody. Life's too short. So no, I'm with you. Yeah, thank you for those comments.
Well, Mike, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you imparting this wisdom into the industry, letting folks know what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're going about doing it. Um, I'm sure you will hear back from folks with regards to this, but I greatly appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, always great to connect with you. Like you said, we've kind of known each other for over 20 years. It's always great to connect with you and anybody from the Calkin Ginsburg team. So thanks again.
Thank you.